Welcome again to the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. Okay, the case I'm going to talk about today involved 3 perpetrators in the mass murder execution style of 4 people that took place in a Houston, Texas home on June 20, 1992, almost 31 years ago. 2 others at the home that day were also shot, but survived and went on to identify the 3 men. They are Arthur Brown Jr., Antonia Tony Dunson, and Marion Dudley. Tony Dunson is currently serving a life sentence in Texas and will be eligible for parole in the year 2027. Marion Dudley had been sentenced to death and was executed by the state of Texas on January 25th of the year 2006 in Huntsville, Texas. Reports indicate that on the day of Dudley's execution, he refused to leave his cell, refused to walk, and while he did not put up a struggle, he had to be carried by prison guards to the execution chamber. Also, from the moment that he was removed from his cell, he remained silent and kept his eyes closed the entire time, and that he had kept his eyes closed until he was officially pronounced dead. He had no final words. Meanwhile, Arthur Brown remained on death row, but now has an execution date scheduled for March 9th of this year. Brown, Dunson, and Dudley were actually living in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. One day before the murders, on June 19, 1992, the 3 men, along with another man named Marion Travis, traveled from Tuscaloosa to Houston, Texas, and arrived at the home of Arthur Brown's sister in the morning, now June 20, 1992. Arthur Brown had actually made the trip from Tuscaloosa to Houston regularly over the previous 8 months to buy drugs from his suppliers in Houston, a married couple named Jose and Rachel Tovar. Sometime after arriving at his sister's house in Houston, the 3 men left to the home of Jose and Rachel Tovar. The 4th man that had accompanied them on the trip, Marion Travis, had stayed behind. But this time, the men's intent was not to buy drugs. They had planned to steal all the drugs and any money in the house. 32-year-old Jose Guadalupe Tovar and his wife Rachel Tovar supplied marijuana and cocaine to other drug dealers, including Arthur Brown and his associates from Alabama. After arriving at the home, Brown and Dudley drew their weapons. Tony Dunson remained outside in the car. Rachel Tovar and her husband Jose were taken into a bedroom. In another room was Rachel's 17-year-old son, Frank Farias, as well as the Tovar's 19-year-old daughter-in-law, Jessica Quinones, who was 9 months pregnant. Jessica's husband, Rachel and Tovar's son Anthony, was not present. But also in that bedroom was a neighbor named Audrey Brown, who just happened to have stopped by for a visit. All 5 people in the home were tied up with strips that were ripped from bed sheets. Then another man named Nicholas Cortez, who once lived at the Tovar home, stopped by for a visit, and he was forced inside into the house, and he was also tied up. All 6 people in the home, Rachel and Jose Tovar, their son Frank, their pregnant daughter-in-law Jessica, the neighbor Audrey, and the friend Nicholas, were all shot, execution style, in the back of the head. Brown and Dudley then proceeded to gather all the drugs and money they could find in the home and fled, with Tony Dunson, the one now doing life in prison, having acted as the getaway driver. Soon after they left, Rachel Tovar regained consciousness. She saw that her husband was dead. She then stumbled over to her son Frank and tried to revive him, but saw that he was also gone. She saw that her daughter-in-law, Jessica, was on the floor in the bathroom struggling to breathe, but Jessica died a short time later. Nicholas Cortez had also regained consciousness as Rachel was calling police. Police and paramedics arrived to find 3 of the 6 persons in the house dead. The neighbor, Audrey Brown, was still barely alive and she was rushed to the hospital, but she died there a short time later. With information provided to authorities in Texas and Alabama by the 2 survivors that included Rachel Tovar and Nicholas Cruz picking out faces from mugshots, and information provided by Arthur Brown's sister in Texas, investigators were quickly able to determine the identities of the 3 perpetrators of the mass murder that became known in the media as the Brownstone Lane murders. Soon after the murders, Arthur Brown had confessed to his sister what they had done. When the trio learned that the police were looking for them, they used cash to buy an SUV. That car was later recovered in Alabama. The men then traveled to Louisville, Kentucky, and then to Columbus, Ohio, while on the run. But they were tracked by federal marshals. Authorities later tracked Antonia Dunson and Marion Dudley to a mobile home in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and almost 3 weeks after the murders, on July 8, 1992, they were arrested. Police also recovered $33,000 in cash from the 2 men at the time of their arrest. Arthur Brown was captured 3 months later in Northport, Alabama on October 23, 1992. Arthur Brown Jr.'s 3 sisters had testified against him in court. However, they would later say that they were coerced to do so. In a recent hearing, a judge signed the death warrant for Arthur Brown Jr., who appeared at the hearing remotely. Brown continues to claim that he was not at the house that day, although he had spent months on the run. And even though Rachel Tovar, one of the survivors that day, who is seen here at the hearing 30 years after the crime, displaying a t-shirt with images of those that perished that day, positively identified Arthur Brown as the man she had been dealing with for almost a year, as one of the 3 men that killed her husband, her son, her pregnant daughter-in-law, and the neighbor. It may be said that 5 souls were killed that day, as the unborn child, who was maybe days away from entering this world, was also taken. Here presented as an angel on Rachel Tovar's t-shirt. That child was going to be named Alyssa Monique. Please remember to subscribe for more death row and upcoming execution stories. I am Paco Rivera. Bye for now.